Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Well, what are we doing? Let's see.
Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast.
Yeah, there we go. Faith Over Breakfast.
My name's Andy Littleton from Mission Church in Tucson, Arizona. I'm sitting with Eric Deepen from the Village. And so, yeah, wow, what as always, quite the breakfast table conversation. Glad to have you at the table. What are you about to hear? Let's see. There's going to be Rosaria, Butterfield, Preston, Sprinkle, debate in the public square, disagreement,
friendship,
lonely
pastors,
Yadier Molina, lonely pastors, Andy's retreat in Puerto Rico, Eric, talking about gender roles as always. There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Very little on gender roles.
I shouldn't have said as always. This is one of Eric. You think a lot about it though. You do.
I do. I think it's very important.
So there you go. Aren't you excited?
I am. I'm really excited. I think it's one of the more this is how it would be if you actually just invited the two of us to coffee and we talked to each other, because it's all over the map.
It's true. And I had a good time.
Yeah, I had a good time too. Thanks, Andy.
Yep.
All right, enjoy, guys. Hey, Andy.
Oh, hey.
Welcome back. It's been a while. You've been, on retreats and partying and, you're just one wild guy.
One wild guy.
Since
partying.
Since the Tupac podcast.
Partying. When was I partying?
I don't know. You were partying at a retreat.
Oh, yeah. That's what it was.
A party retreat.
That's right. I forgot about the partying.
I don't know. Where were you Friday? You were at a retreat because you went back to retreating
Yeah. No, I was at a retreat for kind of processing ministry, like losses, like relational losses in ministry. So
very cool.
Was doing that for about a week.
Well, I guess it's not very cool, but
yeah,
it's good. It's a good thing.
It's good. So I was back. I left last Tuesday, I got back this Tuesday. It was a Tuesday to Tuesday trip. So
did you find it helpful?
Yeah, actually, I did. I had told our elders when I was going on it, I said, this isn't like you go away for a week and you're fixed. Yeah. And I know they know that, but I was just kind of trying to say I've got issues, guys, and I'm not going to come back without issues. But that said, I was really hoping that this would be a meaningful time, and I do think it was. I would say I return with a sense of having some space to process, which I need and is good for me to do. It was guided, which was helpful because I think I need that too sometimes. But also there's a sense of I'm going to have to relate in different ways. That was something that emerged out of it. And that's going to be challenging. But that I think signals a good retreat. I didn't just come away going, I saw the rainforest and I'm just so happy I was gone. It's like, okay, yeah, I was in the rainforest. That was really pretty.
It was in the rainforest?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Which I've never experienced a rainforest. It's really cool. But coming back going, okay, this is gonna push me to have a more healthy way of being is not going to be necessarily easy. Good, probably long-term, better, but not easy, right?
Can you
that makes sense.
Highlight what you mean by relating differently? Can you just explain one?
Well, yeah, I mean
on that?
One thing I think that these folks, and so this is the Kaneo Center. It's called, and it's a guy who's a long-term pastor who ended up with kind of a cumulative post-traumatic stress disorder after a long list of lost relationships and difficult situations. And he Dan White Jr. is his name. He's known in some circles. He was a church planter and missional church writer and such. But he went through that experience, and he and his wife had once done a sabbatical in Puerto Rico. So they went there to try to kind of recoup and figure out what was next, and ended up buying what was kind of an old wealthy person's inn in the rainforest that had been damaged by the hurricane, and rehabbing it, and are using it to do these retreats for other leaders going through similar stuff. But part of his journey was that he had to realize, and this is what he's offering to other people like me, that part of it was, ministry is painful, but part of it is he needed to make some changes, right? And some different ways of relating. Some of that just had to do with like second half of life and going, okay, what's a new way of relating in the second half of life? What have I learned? What do I need to change? How do I need to differentiate my younger self from my kind of like matured self? And some of it is just when you look at that stuff, you realize, obviously, it's not all one directional. It's not like you're just this punching bag because you're in ministry. Like sometimes you've invited these ways of treating and viewing yourself by maybe needing to make different boundaries and or take a different posture to the world. So for me, there's a lot to it, and I don't know if that's all this podcast or whatever, but
let's give us one different way of relating as a pastor that you kind of are going to walk away with this.
Yeah. So I think that I will at times want or feel a need for something for me. Like I need this, but I will quickly lay that down because I feel like at the end of the day, and some of this is wrapped up in like calling, and some of it's wrapped up in my like relational longings and stuff, but I'll say like, well, my needs are secondary to yours. Therefore, whatever you need, I'll do. Whatever, if you're not going to follow through with your commitment, I'll follow through with it for you. If you're tired and I'm tired, I'll still be the one who shows up. If ultimately, like I'm going to be the one that carries the burden. Part of that, comes from theological misunderstandings, I'm sure, of my, because I do feel called to serve and to lay my life down, and sometimes confusing. Is that what I'm doing right now? Or is this enabling? Or is this being used? And it's hard to parse out. And so my knee jerk is just I'll just do it myself. Maybe I get a little resentful, and that harms relationships. Right. And so looking at that piece and going, I didn't speak up because I didn't want to deal with somebody's response. There's things where maybe I'll think that I don't want you to do that, or I don't want to participate in that.
Right.
But rather than speak into that and say that, like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't think we should do that. I struggle with that because on the other end of that, somebody might be upset, angry, or reject me, right? And it feels like safer to not just go after that. But the truth is, when you look at the stories of the losses over the years, a lot of them started there, and I didn't save it by not addressing it.
Right.
And so then a takeaway, you go, so I might need to move into those things sooner and with more clarity and honesty. And that's scary because that actually doesn't mean conflict goes off the table or whatever.
Right.
It just means, and I think I'm nervous about, you've got years of walking in a certain way. Like, am I going to be able to change that?
Sure.
What's that going to look like? Eric wants to talk about a certain topic today. I don't want to. How do I address that with him?
Well, you don't want to talk about any of the things I ever want to talk about. So.
See, now we're moving into the conflict. This is what I didn't want to do.
Yeah, see, here it is, right there.
Right, live on Faith Over Breakfast.
Faith Over Breakfast. Yep.
There
you go.
So, there you go. So, Yeah, and hey, and that is a small but live and direct thing. So I'm very much in my head. And that was a thing we talked about in the retreat, kind of like my Enneagram type. I tend to think a lot of different personality profiles can give you this type of information, but things don't come into my head and categorize in quick, black and white categories. There's a lot of mud. And so something like this, I go,
I've experienced that.
Yeah. And I go, yeah, right. Like, so you didn't want to talk about Tupac. I wanted to talk about Tupac. So, when do you say like, I don't like engaging with this topic, or when do you need to go, okay, no, lay it down. And so I'll come into the whole thing going, I don't know how I feel about it. Eric's already posting about it on social media. Here we go. What choice do I have? Do I have a choice? Does it matter if I have a choice? Why am I making this a big deal? It's just a podcast.
Yeah.
So I spend a lot of time in the mud, which leads to why I need times to get away and unravel the spaghetti.
Sure.
Which is, I think I struggle to ask for that. Well, I don't know. Sometimes I do. See, even that's mud. I don't know, man. So I need to move into these ambiguities.
So we wanted to talk about friendship, and here we are. We're talking about friendship, how people interact as friends, right?
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, that's what I went into in the retreat, man.
Yeah. So
I saw some big lizards.
That's awesome. Sounds like maybe in some ways you're being invited to have less nurturing less codependent relationships within your ministry. So,
right. That would be a way of saying it. Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is maybe getting more in touch with being seen and known, like your desire for that.
Right.
Yeah. And heard.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And then also dealing with your own sin patterns and all that process.
It's all there, right?
Yeah.
It's not one or the other.
Sure.
Which is, again, why I say I think this was a good retreat, because I didn't come away going, yeah, man, I've been real sinned against, and people that go to churches just stink. Like, pastors are great, these people. I didn't come away feeling that way. I came away feeling like, yeah, I have been hurt. And yeah, I've been a contributor. And maybe in ways that I needed to like look deeper under that. So why, like, it's not just the presenting end conflict or whatever, the last straw. It's not that. It's usually like this something that like festers for a long time, something that remains unaddressed or that I'm unclear on in the first place or something, and going, man, yeah. And I don't expect that I'll ever like perfect this way of being, but I think I can grow. So that's, yeah. Anyway, so what do you want to talk about? Rosaria, Butterfield, Preston, Sprinkle.
Well, you want to talk about friendship. Yeah. And because partly I wrote an article on it or a little thing about it in the past, and you've been thinking about it.
Yeah.
And honestly, the Rosario, Butterfield, Preston, Sprinkle thing had to do in some ways with friendship, not about necessarily what they actually are talking about.
Sure. So let's like define that Rosaria, Butterfield, Preston, Sprinkle thing. Well, I haven't had time.
The very short version of it is 2 days ago at Liberty University, or maybe it's 3 days now. She did her normal speech and then went after Revoice and Crew and Preston Sprinkle and accused them and called things and called them to repent.
Okay.
Which I have a whole set of issues because I feel like sometimes Rosario is a Butterfield is much like she's a big time, complementarian, and then acts like an egalitarian and runs around as a woman telling everybody what to do. But that's another thing for another issue, right?
There's a little bit of your life that you've had some experience with that.
Yeah, but that's not really. I had a hard time with it because I feel like I see it in church all the time, and I think it hinders just relationship and friendship. And to go back to like, I agree that pastors have their own sin issues that they bring, but I still think being a pastor is one of the most difficult and stressful careers you can choose to be part of or be called into. It's very difficult to have friends
Yes.
Because there's often is a dual kind of relationship where you're pastoring someone and they're your peer and they're your friend.
Sometimes not even just dual. There's
Yes,
so many layers. Yeah.
And they're your wife. Wait,
Yeah.
they're all of those lined up, and you make all of these shifts, right? You go from like accountant to counselor to preacher to coach to janitor to to construction worker to handyman. You do all those things, and you don't just do like this week I'm the handyman, and next week I'm the preacher. You do like 3 hours of janitorial work, and then 2 hours of trauma counseling, 1 hour of prep for your sermon. Right. Like you got all these shifts. Your brain's not great for that. Anyway, it makes it difficult for friendship. But then you look at the public sphere, and it seems like there's such a celebrity worship of pastors. So they're out there, and then they fall. So we have the celebrity, and we have the fallen celebrity. And so I don't feel like it allows a lot of room for pastors just to be normal people.
Yeah, Dan of Kaneo Center had an anecdote that he shared that he was pastoring in Syracuse, and he was just at a little sports bar watching something, just kind of like, oh, I want to catch the game, and he was sitting next to somebody, started kind of chatting it up with them. Oh yeah, and the question comes up, what do you do? And he says, oh well, I'm a pastor. And the guy's response was wasn't negative toward him, but it was like, oh wow. Man, nobody likes you guys. What's that like? And he was just surprised by it. He was just like, oh yeah, you guys are
the bane of existence.
The bane of ever. People just know you guys are terrible. And he was like, oh really? Oh shoot.
Right. And
but not everyone does that. But there's you're either the expectations are very high. You're gonna really be the spiritual father figure for people and life coach and the best counselor ever, and also a TED Talk level communicator weekly, or else this isn't really feeding me
right
at
there's
this church. Or
so much places to be critiqued.
There's a lot of places to be critiqued, and then but then it's very easy. How many stories have I heard of people who say, yeah, I went to a church and the pastor said this one thing and it just damaged me. And I go, oh man, that was one little slip. That pastor said one thing wrong that stuck in your head and had all this power.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's way deeper than that. But sometimes it feels like it's just that all it takes is one.
Right. And you hear it in the reverse, which is just as bad. It's just like, I went to this church and this pastor said this and it changed my life. And now I'm I'm a follower of Jesus and I'm a good husband. It's all because of this sentence. That's how the narrative is. And you're like, wow,
I got to get my senses right.
I got to change. I can change people's lives. It's really difficult. So in the friendship part, my conversation was just, what is it? I think there's supposed to be some special care for pastors and for their families. And I think that part of friendship is just the willingness to be in the long haul with somebody, to really walk together. And my critique of the Preston sprinkle, because I don't care about crew as much and revoice, but I know enough about Preston to know how careful he is, even with Rosario, and how he has always lifted her up, always been very caring for her, and how much he tries to steelman other people's arguments and things and to honor them. And so just to be called out in front of it was a lot of people, it just seemed like this isn't the way Christians should be operating.
Yeah, the reason I didn't want to talk about it was twofold. One was that I haven't had time. So speaking of what I'm learning about myself, I like a little time to have a clue what I'm talking about. But I have watched some videos of Butterfield's critique before, just not lately.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I kind of said to you in the text, I think this is kind of old news. And then the other thing is, I think in my head, I thought, so, okay, so what's the solution? We get on here and put Rosaria Butterfield on blast for blasting Preston Sprinkle? How does that help anything? We add to the narrative of pastors who critique other Christian leaders for critiquing other Christian leaders. Like, okay, when does it end? Like, is this just clickbait? That because they're arguing, we can argue about whether or not they should argue. And I think that's just where my head is at. But
No, I agree.
But I do also like see what you're saying. I have also appreciated, I mean, the great thing about Rosaria Butterfield, especially her early work, was it was very smart, very sharp, but also is coming at things from like an angle you just hadn't heard before.
Right. And
she clearly knows her stuff.
Yeah.
Very
theologically astute, and she's also astute in the world that she came out of.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a speaking of Syracuse, you've got the professor of queer theory at Syracuse University goes through a conversion experience, and this is the type of person she is. She is smart, academic, able to hold her own, and she's carried that over into being a Christian. Yeah, and then that's positive. But on the negative side is there's a side of that where you have power. You can tear down another person's argument. And my general tendency is to say Christians get a bad enough name out there. When a person is a Christian, so say Butterfield sees a legitimate flaw in Preston Sprinkle's thinking. Is that possible?
Yeah, of
sure,
course.
It's possible, right? Okay. So, but Preston Sprinkle is a Christian in a post-Christian culture where Christianity is being critiqued everywhere. Yeah. Like, my tendency would be to say, hey, Rosaria, this guy's going to be in the kingdom with you. Treat him real nice and state your arguments in such a way that still believe the best about him and cast him in the best light to all the unbelievers paying attention to you. That's what I would say. Yeah. But then there has to be space to disagree. And then I sort of long for the days when we didn't disagree on video. But I don't know what else to do.
So I think my thing was not so much, okay, Rosario, that's nice, and Preston, and I get there in public eye, and so there's this public critique that happens that I don't agree with and don't like, but I get it. And now I'm part of it. And I even said it in the little thing I wrote. My point is, I don't care about them. It happens in my church. It happens in churches that I'm connected to, where we feel like we have this need to police everyone. Sure. Like that we're so uncomfortable with slight differences. Yeah. From politics to roles of women and men to, baptism to the end times to New Testament scholarship, and we want to police each other so much so that we police each other out of relationship, and so it makes it difficult, and then we get our feelings hurt, and it's not even about real things. You know what I mean? And I think that's when it comes to friendship, I think that critiquing is what I experience as a pastor, and what I see happen to other pastors is that they're critiqued all the time. Well, and they're critiqued to see if they're right, and if they've got all their ducks in a row, and if it's they're theologically, checking off the boxes, or politically checking off the boxes, or
as a counselor checking off the boxes, or interpersonally, do you offer me enough community or whatever?
Right. And we don't just do it to pastors; we do it
to each other
all the way through community. And that's the thing. Like why I had an issue with Rosario in particular was just that she is just modeling what I think we don't need in Christian community. And I would wish that they would model something better. Like that she would have called Preston and said, I'm not going to say anything about you publicly unless you are sitting with me and we can talk about it in front of people. So that people can see relationship happen. Yes. And so I just feel like, I don't know, just that's the issue I have. And so when it makes friendship go all the way back down to friendship, I'm just like, well, friendship is hard when you're always critiquing everyone. It's hard to be friends when I think you're critiquing me all the time. Yeah. Because I don't want to be your friend if you're critiquing me all the time. Right. If I've got to get it right to be your friend.
Well, I mean, this gets at just the core.
Or in church with you, or your pastor.
Yeah. This is slightly neurodivergent, but okay, so what are we getting wrong that sports gets right? Okay, so
that's going to be the title of this podcast. What are we getting wrong that sports get right?
But so here I am in my U of A gear, right?
Yeah,
I'm gonna go to
Arizona hat.
I'm going to go to the basketball game tonight with my daughter. And I will be in that room with people who think wildly differently than me, with people who have all different sorts of thoughts and opinions, with just downright, there will be criminals there. There will be, there will be people who in illicit affairs. There will be a little old lady. There'll be, people who are on a date. There will be friends who just drank way too much beer. But we will all, I can near guarantee witness a win tonight, and will
love this team
and love this team
because it's good,
and feel a sense of connection with each other and the team and a camaraderie, right? So sports can do that. Now, then if you go get in an internet chat, I joined a Chicago Cubs Facebook group. Honestly, truth is, because I want to write this book that involves a trip to Wrigley Field, and I want to be able to share it in these forums someday. But there they rip each other and the organization to absolute shred, and I hate it. I literally am just like, I need to just snooze this thing because it's garbage. So in that space, it's
terrible.
Not unified.
Terrible.
So I'm not saying sports has got the corner on this.
It's just in the moment at the game.
At the moment at the game, when you're in person together at the game, it's you forget all about that stuff, and you just love a team together, right?
Yeah.
So why can't we as Christians? Why is church less like that for us? Why is it more like we're there critiquing? Like that's, gauging, is this meeting my needs? And is it because the church is actually just not as good as a sports game? Or is it because we as people have a different relationship to our relationship with God than we do to these meaningless things? Or are we not really as committed to the core idea as we think we are? Like at the Arizona game, the commitment is to our home team. Are we really committed to the church like that, to where we love it that much?
Right. Well,
We're
also committed to an experience at the game, right? We're looking for this experience,
and churches, people want that too, and they're not the same. Obviously,
no, they are not.
I know that.
Yeah, I think church is all encompassing. It's about there's a lot more at stake, it seems, right? Or at least people feel like there's more at stake. Like,
you don't go to the sports game thinking, I wonder if they can fix my marriage.
Right. Or help me understand why there's so much suffering in the world.
Yeah. Or get rid of this existential dread. We think it'll lift while we're at the game.
Sure.
Actually.
Yeah.
Which is part of it.
Yeah. Or connect me to God when I don't feel connected. Yeah, there's a lot that we come to it with.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But then the people. So I went to one game in Puerto Rico. Yadier Molina is a big, longtime star of the St. Louis Cardinals, and he's coaching this little team there. It was kind of a cool surprise. And there was a rain delay. There's like 100 people at the game. So I went down. I'm going to say hi to Yadier Molina, right? Because he's just standing outside the dugout. Nobody's around. I walk down. He kind of looks over, sees a fan coming, goes inside the dugout. He's just like, no, I don't think so. And but I didn't walk away just going like, I hate Yadier Molina. Never going to a game there. I just was like,
sure.
Yeah, he wasn't in the mood he's coaching his team. He didn't want to talk to some random fan right now. And he wasn't a jerk. He just moved the other direction. So I didn't, but with pastors, sports star, we don't have high expectations on them other than them to play their game.
Right. Because there's no connection. Right?
If the ball goes in the hoop, we'll crucify him if the ball doesn't go in the hoop very often, but we don't really care about them as with the pastor. You do care. You want a deep, meaningful experience and connection with this person. It's different.
Yeah, but and I think this we could talk, because we're pastors. We can talk about the congregation pastoral relationship. But as a pastor pastoring people, a lot of what it is doing is trying to help them figure out conflict help them figure out forgiveness, help them figure out repentance, help them learn to be friends with people who are different than them. Right? Because all of a sudden when you go to a church, you find that like 2/3 of the people you don't have anything in common with.
Oh man, maybe more than that. Like,
right.
I mean, at least at our church, I've talked about if we weren't Christians, we're not in the same room.
Right.
We're not doing anything together. And that's beautiful, by the way. Like, that's a creating of a new community.
Sure, agreed. Around Jesus.
And which is exactly a huge part of the point.
Right.
But but it's not, there aren't all these, we're not all there because of affinities. We're not all there because we're the same. And we see the world the same way. Or we're related or something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the hard part for me is that we end up so vehemently against each other in secondary issues or how we relate with one another.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe I don't have a lot of good social cues, and so I say some things that are hurtful to you. Like, it's really hard then to learn to enter into community and friendship with me. Or if, like, we all land on the same place when it comes to the inspiration of Scripture and marriage and all the things, but maybe we are a little different on the roles of men and women in the church, et cetera, et cetera. Sure. Then we can't be in community because there's just one little thing, and it just, there's discontinuity, or what we would call cognitive dissonance between us somewhere, and people have such a hard time with the dissonance. Everything's got to, like... It's like having, tendinitis in your ear. Like, there's this ringing, and you just can't handle it. Like, I can't have this ringing. Yeah. Everything else, I can hear you fine, like, perfectly.
Well, and it'd be, if the whole human community had the same list, that'd be one thing, but we don't. Like, for certain people, and this is based on some of it's our convictions, our personality types, our experiences, things that, like, my views on men and women in the church are not entirely scriptural. Some of that has to do with the climate in my home, right? And the way that I felt that men and women related in my childhood experience, right? And like, so that's all coming to bear for people, right? Like,
oh yeah. So I guess for me, like, I get that it's messy and it's hard on pastors, and I think congregations should be aware of that. I just wish that our bigger figures would model for us what it looks like to offer each other generosity and really to have more conversations together about things that they disagree with, and show what it looks like to honor one another in that.
Well, you know what that means?
What's that?
You need to go on a speaking tour and become one of the bigger ones.
I'm not that good of a speaker.
Well, but you would do that. You would model that. That's what we need. We don't need good speakers. We need good modelers who are bad speakers, who are so persistent that people just have to listen to them.
Just have to listen.
Because they just won't stop.
Yeah, well, I'm relatively persistent on a lot of ends. I'll be 90 by the time people are like, yeah, maybe we should have him come talk.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh, I can barely say anything.
It'd be like one of those great artists where nobody bought their work till they'd been dead 100 years, and then they went, what a genius.
What a genius. And you can listen to like 1,000 of his sermons online.
Yeah.
Just dig into Eric now.
Yeah. They'll see, man. They'll come around.
They'll come around. Someone will have to maintain all the audio until then.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure they will. There will be a high commitment to maintaining that audio. There will be the Village Archives.
Oh, if the Village is around 100 years from now, I hope so.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Does that matter? That's a whole nother podcast. Like, what is it about us wanting to see I want Mission Church to be around, but like,
yeah, there's something about legacy.
There's something that's that's another podcast. So yeah, man, I mean, of course on this retreat, like what you're talking about was a big piece of this for me. Like, so you had mentioned in your little write-up, Josh Reich's article about 5 to 7. So Josh Reich is he had planted a church here in Tucson. He's elsewhere now. But that's how we got familiar with Josh. Anyway, he had written something about 5 to 7 relationships a year on average that a pastor loses. And that sounds about right. I did an inventory of since we planted.
His thing is that a person loses 5 to 7 significant relationships in their lifetime. Pastors lose them a year. So that's the thing that's dramatic for him.
Yeah, I did an inventory on this retreat, and there were in the 10 years of kind of being a pastor of this little church we planted. So this doesn't count, I've been a pastor for over 20, in Christian ministry over 20. But in the 10 years, and I think I'm missing some, but there were about 75 relationships, 75 people who I would say it ended not in this isn't just losses. This is ones where it was hard. So somehow, either like, maybe it was something in their personal life and they just took off, but there wasn't resolution, or there was a disagreement or a theological something, or sometimes just an outright, you're not what I'm looking for. This church isn't what I'm looking for, or somebody else in this church and you couldn't fix it, whatever the case. So 75 in 10 years. So that's on the slight high end of that average. And I'm probably missing some. And that doesn't count the people that just moved and, were here, but then gone. And so you go, I invested in that relationship and now it's over, or not the same. Not, I don't see them often or whatever. So that's significant, right? And so that was one of the pieces, like to categorize that out. And then some stood out as like ultra painful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you go, so there's the amount, and then some where you go, that one's I'm still living out of that one.
Yeah.
I'm still afraid of people like that person. I'm still hurting on this one,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so some of them are acute, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm not saying it doesn't go the other direction. I'm not saying that some of those people aren't out there going,
wow, he wounded me.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely, and legitimately.
But that difference that you're suggesting is that as a pastor, the sheer amount is kind of overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it is. And the thing is, if you decide to be really committed to the space that you're living, like the church that you are, then that means those relationships still dance around the outside. Like there's a chance to bump into them at Costco, or to have find, so-and-so is connected to them that you're close to, or, there's division in family, and it's just a lot to maybe I shouldn't say this on air, but I'm gonna. It's just that sometimes I realize, this is why pastors leave, and they take another job.
Yeah.
It's because they're like, then I don't have to deal with any of these relationships. If I go take a church, in a different state, you just move to the different state and start all over again.
Yeah, you don't have to. Right. Oh, I completely get why. I don't know if it's good. I don't know. I think it depends on the person. Maybe it is too difficult. But yeah, if you just hop and leave town, kind of treat it like a military job, where it's like, all right, I'm 5 years here, I'm going to ship off across the country, fresh start. There is something nice about that, because you're I
don't know how much of this is true anymore, but because and you could probably speak this better than I can, but growing up in the church, my experience was that you get a younger guy, and if he's successful about 5 to 7 years in the first church, if it grows underneath him and he's quote unquote successful, then he goes to another church that's a little bit bigger, and he pastors that church. And so you kind of have this, he gets more money. Or he
it's done. Like the 5 to 7 years is when pastors who aren't going to make it tend to fizzle.
Right, or they're finished.
In the data out there somewhere.
Yeah. So they either done or they move up.
Yeah.
Right. And so you lose. So I can remember really liking a pastor.
Yeah.
And then he leaves. And then another guy comes in. It takes 3-4 years. And you're like, okay, I really like this guy too.
Yeah.
I've kind of settled in with him, and I like his, I've learned his teaching, and now I'm kind of trying to be part of his community. And then now he's gone. That's really kind of jolting to even just as a person in the congregation.
Oh, I've heard people talk about churches. There's some I've heard where they went to one where the pastor was there for decades, and that's usually fairly positive, honestly, for those who liked it, right? Yeah. But then you hear about the ones where their church life was always changing, and that is, I've rarely heard, I can't think of any time I've heard somebody say that was a good thing. like this spiritual community always had a different leader, unless they had this really strong board of elders, and the pastor was almost more just like a talking head.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that and oddly, that's almost better than the other version, where this new person and the culture shifts and changes every 5 to 7 years.
Right, because the more pastor-driven churches, where the pastor has his own vision, he's got to come in and like take 3 to 4 years to win everybody over, and then do that for 3 years,
and then sometimes like you get through that process and go, well, it's not going to work. So everybody is just like, holy cow!
Yeah,
we just did all that, and now we're going to have to do it again.
Yeah,
and you just don't. At some point, you're like, this is exhausting.
Yeah. I mean, the church that I went, the first church job I had, it was a church plant. The planter had grown it to about 100 adults and kids. He was like, this is my max capacity. I don't know how to grow church past this. I don't think it's my gifting. You need to bring in someone who really knows how to streamline and bring a church large, make it grow again, to grow in people, because that's always the goal.
Or that
in the back
was especially the goal
in the 90s. Yeah. But so, and then that just fell apart, and then I ended up there. But it's just, and when I would talk to people, nobody, that's all they ever talked about was that pastor, because he was a really, really good pastor. And that's why the church grew. In the sense of, I don't mean like he was a great teacher. He just shepherded people, and they felt shepherded and loved. And so when he left, they just felt abandoned.
And I think there's a lot of layers to this. There really are. I think we've talked before about the time I heard Alan Hirsch talking in Phoenix, and I don't relate to every single bit of Alan Hirsch. That doesn't matter, of course. Nobody out there. But this piece,
I like Alan. No,
I like him too. I actually don't. Here's what I should say. I don't know what Alan Hirsch thinks about 90% of stuff, to me, if I'm honest. That's all I'm trying to say. I don't know, not trying to
Don't make me an Alan Hirscher.
I don't know. Maybe I am. I don't know. Maybe I am. But this piece I thought was really good. So he's talking about, and actually I say all that because the 5-fold gifts that he talks about, I'm not crystal clear on my understanding of how that works. So but the piece that he mentioned was apostolic people tend to start churches, and then you start wanting more of a shepherding type person. And so you replace the apostolic person with the shepherd. And then people tend to remember the apostolic leader because they got all these things started and they long to do new things. And so they get tired of the shepherd who doesn't lead them into new territory. So they try to find another apostolic person. And he kind of viewed it as, what you need is all of it. You need a church that's thick, where the people of the church are becoming leaders. And I think you do this at the Village very well, where there are people with an apostolic role, and that role remains for them, and there's people with a shepherding role. But if you professionalize too much and you have to have a pro that's paid $200,000 to do this, you're not going to be able to do it. But if you raise up people from within, you can have all the gifts present in your church, and it's well-rounded. Yeah. Now, when I read the 5-fold gifting, I was that what Paul meant? I don't know. But that model makes sense to me, the way that Hirsch explained it. And I thought, so I have a little more of a let's try new stuff mentality to me. I'm a little less, I'm not as, I think, impressive in the if somebody wants me to create a life structure for them, that's just not, that's not how I tend to operate. Right. But there are, or to be just the person that you just sit down with and they just gaze into your eyes and just say, I see your pain. Wow. There are people in our church like that. Right. But I don't know if it's me. But so I tend to think that rather than always replacing and trying to have the person that's going to grow it or whatever, that raising up of people, the whole body of Christ, is a corrective to that. But that's a retraining of the way that we think about spiritual community. I think in our American context, that doesn't fit the paradigm for most folks. And that takes a lot of recasting.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, man, we were all over the map today, Andy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. That is a true faith over breakfast. That's
like
what
you and I were having breakfast
kind
together.
of what you wanted, man. I think. Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I always want. Just all over the map.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah. And, well, yeah. I'm mostly okay with it. I don't know if other people are, but I'm fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, this podcast is for you and me. Let's be real. If anybody listens, fine. Yeah.
I like talking to you.
Yeah.
It's weird. I mean, that you're in my relationship time-wise is probably mostly based
at this podcast.
In front of a mic with headphones on.
Yeah.
So your voice in my head is a little different.
That's interesting. It's that or some kind of meetings that aren't I mean, whether it's denominational or whatever.
Or in a car driving
to those
meetings.
Yeah. So yeah, our relationship is filtered through headphones or like road noise.
Yeah. And maybe a little bit before or after the podcast. But yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. And if you do have any response to our lovely Faith Over Breakfast, or people apparently listen to our podcast. They hear the ads, they follow the ads, and they even buy the stuff.
Oh wow, this is new.
Yeah.
Are you starting to see a lot of new products? And
I just see the date.
What are our ads? I don't even know.
I don't even know I guess it means that you followed the podcast because we only advertise other podcasts.
Yeah. Oh.
And so it tells you how many you got monetized and then how many were fulfilled.
Wow.
So that means that they actually followed that podcast.
That's something else, man.
So, apparently, it's people are listening and we love that you listen to us and continue to rate us. It really is helpful in getting our podcast out to the world so that we can become the, number one Faith Over Breakfast podcast.
So that we can start getting highly critiqued in the public sphere. We need your help to get to that level.
We need to.
We need Rosaria Butterfield to set her sights on us and say, repent. Hey, man. Probably be the best thing that ever happened to our careers right
Yeah. Again, maybe, we want to take this on the road, be on stages, let people, watch us talk.
We could bring the eating back on stage. We just eat in front of people.
That would be great. I drink cortados.
Yeah, just lots of slurping noises in the microphone.
All right. Well, it's faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. By the way, thank you, Colleen, for your email. It was really nice and precious.
Oh.
All right. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.